I'll give you some context from like last weekend. Once again, we had a mass shooting in Washington Park, and I know you know where that is, just
Oh
west
yeah,
of where I grew up in Hyde Park.
yeah.
Nine, I think it was nine shot or seven, I forget, two dead. And the news has now come out. Police are reporting it was due to an argument facilitated by gang rivalries. And while mass shootings, in fact, in Chicago are only about 4% of gun deaths, we excavated that data also. The real issue here is temper, right? It's those $5 arguments. It's that hot delusional entitlement of which Ramon Barnes spoke. And all summer long, Glenn, people here, we talk about trauma, right? At many levels, and there is no trauma like the trauma in the African American community from the violence, the deadly violence, the shootings. I won't pretend to have experienced that trauma myself. But I can tell you there's another trauma of living in the city, and the crime is now spreading. And we probably talked about this last time. It's in the white neighborhoods. It's in the suburbs. It's in Evanston now. It's in Lake County, up toward the Wisconsin border. 8 shootings in one night in Waukegan. They had an emergency community meeting. So there's another trauma, which is the trauma of reading the news. And boy, yeah, it sounds like a first world problem, but then you see, my gosh, they're losing Rogers Park in Edgewater, and to non-Chicagoans, and Glenn, you know what I mean, to
I know
non-Chicago.
Rogers Park. I know Sheridan Road going up north because I used to, from 1970 to 72, drive it every morning from R.R. Donnelly and Sons in order to get to Northwestern University campus. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And these were Jewish neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There are high rises there in Edgewater. This was the North Side where stuff doesn't happen. And people come home and put some Puccini on the stereo and have a crisp Chablis from Burgundy. And, and now it's...
And where I used to see, Save Soviet Jewry. I can remember the sign hanging in the 1970s, in the late 60s. Hanging above the street, Sheridan Road, all the way across the street.
Yes. And now you best be carrying. It's come to that. So it's kind of gone off the hook. I call it the great unraveling. Oak Park. Here is a suburb just to the west of Chicago, which you know of well, I am sure, just past the border with Chicago, bordering Austin. The city of Oak Park, where they have those Frank Lloyd Wright homes, where Ernest Hemingway grew up.
In which for many years had been touted as a stably integrated middle-class suburb of Chicago. They worked very hard to maintain racial integration and avoid the white flight problem from an inner ring suburban town.
And there has been so much to commend Oak Park. I mean, it's beautiful, it's leafy, there's historic Frank Lloyd Wright homes. Most importantly, what you just spoke of now, the city council, I believe I read this, has just voted to end late night hours at gas stations because there have been a series of carjackings there. So you have a situation where, because of the criminal justice system in Cook County, repeat violent offenders, particularly weapons offenders, and this is so ironic considering all the talk about instituting new laws like, weapons restrictions at the federal level. We are not enforcing existing law against repeated gun offenders because with multiple prior convictions for weapons offenses, when they commit new weapons offenses, they are too often let out on low cash or no cash bail. And then before their new trial occurs, they're out doing more stuff, including carjackings, shootings, and even fatal shootings. And one night in Oak Park earlier this summer, a brother and sister from the west side of Chicago, young, one was 17, I think, one was 21, They wanted to go jack a car, and they did. And they killed a young woman who was sort of a pillar of her high school community in Oak Park. And that shook everyone there to their roots. But it wasn't an isolated incident. There had been a whole series of carjackings. And so now they're mandating
my heart. You're breaking my heart, Matt. You know, I mean, I hear death knells. This sounds like you could get over into an area where you can't get back from it. And the other thing I hear is an argument for the Second Amendment, frankly. And y'all can get mad at me if you want to. If the state will not protect you, you have a right to protect yourself. I mean, I can see that argument very clearly. But can we talk about the first thing? Is my city, my hometown, dying?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Glenn? I lost a chunk of audio from you.
I'm sorry. What I said, can you hear me now, was,
yeah.
Is my hometown dying? I said two things. I said, you just made a case for the Second Amendment, in my opinion.
Right.
And I said, it feels like death knell, the kind of report that you're giving me.
Yes, it might be dying. People are fighting to keep it alive. We'll know a lot more, I'm going to say, by April of this year. In November, we have a gubernatorial election and state legislative elections. It's odds on, but I won't digress into politics. A lot of people feel like it is dying. At the same time, and I should point this out, it may be that we're headed for an extended purgatory. The thing is that Metro Chicago, and you know this well, Glenn, has heft. It has population heft. It has economic heft. And this is still a metro region of some 8 million people. Now, yes, Ken Griffin, the well-known conservative billionaire, moved his hedge fund, Citadel, to Miami. That was significant. Boeing moved its headquarters away. The headquarters was largely symbolic, but importantly symbolic. Other new companies have moved here, as Mayor Lightfoot's office points out. But here's the thing. Downtown is different. Downtown looks like a ghost town. Security card check-ins in office buildings were down to something like 44% of capacity earlier this year, if I remember that report correctly. Real estate, leasing rates are not really what to look at. It's how often those office buildings are being used. New York is grappling with the same thing. We're seeing articles in Bloomberg about converting office buildings to apartments. And yet, where is the crime rising most? In Chicago, in Police District 1 and Police District 18, which straddle the Chicago River on both sides. So we're talking from 31st Street at the south end of District 1 up to about Fullerton at the north end of District 18. The motor vehicle thefts and the thefts are up dramatically. Criminal sexual assaults are up dramatically in the North Loop. There's a whole lot going on, and so the streets are emptying out. Yep, if there's a music festival, the streets may be jammed downtown, but by and large, it's looking like a ghost town. Retailers are leaving. Hotels, historic hotels, are being foreclosed upon by the lenders, like the Palmer House. So there are a lot of things, yes, Glenn, that leave people with the impression Chicago is dying. I'm saying don't count it out quite yet, but it's late in the fight. And if Chicago were a boxer, he would be bloodied. And the styptic pencil's been taken out a lot. And, we got to figure it out.
Chicago going the way of Detroit. That thought just makes me ill.